Righto, we've got liftoff. So thanks for your patience this morning. So a couple of you weren't at the first class. That's completely fine. There's two videos from that first class. In the Learn page, I've made a new I've just renamed an old section into the current videos, current recordings for semester 2 2019, and the updated link is in there. So I've got that playlist in YouTube. So all those playlists end up sitting there, and I just keep creating more playlists. So if ever you want to go back later on or something to have a look at these things, that's fine. You still have access to those. Have a look at that. I was going to say at your leisure, but do that fairly soon, because it gives the background to what we're talking about. Some of the things today might not make perfect sense. And I'll try to clarify things a little bit as I go that you might miss out on. But if you guys do need a little bit extra explanation on something, just let me know. Otherwise, we'll just keep rolling through as per normal. One of the important things about this subject is that there are many tasks to do, many assessments. They're fairly reflective of what you'll end up having to do whenever you start any drafting project, is you do all this background research before you go on to do those things. And then all of our steps are fairly representative of what you'll end up doing in these projects. But that means there's, 42 assessments in planning approval only. So there's a lot, and divide that by 18 weeks, looking around the 2 to 3 assessments a week. Typically they're not big. So some of them are 5-minute type things, tick and flick, little questionnaires. Others do take a little bit longer, but I'm hoping to knock off 2 of them today in the class. So we're not talking about huge amounts of time. Now, the first time you do these things, they will take longer, I understand that. So the 2 background research tasks that we'll be doing today, I'm looking to spend probably about half an hour on each. But once you get quite good and quite proficient at it, you'll knock them off fairly quickly. And yeah, I'll leave it at that for those ones now. But apart from that, given that there are a lot of these small steps that happen, it happens in a very sequential order. They have to one thing has to happen before another thing can happen. It does end up being a bit of a moving feast in this class as to where people are at, and I try to maintain as much flexibility as I can to ensure that I can just get everybody moving through at their pace, which does mean that things do slip out of order a little bit, and we do, and you do end up having to remind me, hey, I'm waiting on this thing, we've got to do this thing today. That'll happen. But as long as we keep up the communication about things, it'll work fine. And that is probably it's a very important thing for when you're working in the industry as well, is communication. Now, yes, deadlines are important, because people have holding costs that are, we're talking very large sums of money. We have trades that are booked in at certain and other players. It's not just one party who's involved in building a building. There are many parties, and things do have to happen in a sequential fashion. If you cause delays, then that has a flow-on effect. So deadlines are important, but what's even more important than that is communication. If you keep everybody up to speed with where you're at, that's probably the most important thing. So yes, look, when you're working in the industry, sometimes on a Friday night you'll still be there, because you've got to get this thing out by Monday. It happens. But before you go doing that, you communicate to people, say, look, we can't get it in by 5 o'clock Friday, we're going to stay back, get this done, but you have it then. So treat me the same way, and I'll try to treat you the same way as well. That communication is key. So So what we went through last week was just a bit of a background into the planning process and the various different players within that, and what our roles are. Today we're going to be looking at our sources of information, and this has been. Oh, is that? That's not the PDF. I might grab the PDF of that. So, okay. This, like as I mentioned in last week's class, there are massive changes happening for the South Australian planning system at the moment. So the first part has already been rolled out in remote areas. So there are areas within South Australia that don't have a local council, surprisingly enough. Those, or they don't have a development plan. That's where the new system has first is currently being trialled. It's been on trial now for about a month in those areas. The next areas for it to be rolled out are some of your more regional councils. So this doesn't include the metropolitan area, won't include Mount Barker, Alexandrina, Adelaide Hills, Onkaparinga, etc. But it will include things like Yankalilla Council, Victor Harbour Council. I think it will include Lower Light and some of those councils up to the north. So not too far away, but where we start to get at least a little bit of population density, where it's not 50 kilometres between the next town scenario. That is in a big state of flux at the moment, and we'll see how that all pans out. And beyond that, it's fairly well explained. Well, it's explained to a little extent in the video. If you do wish to do further reading on it, and I've got to sit down one night soon and do some more reading on this, because it keeps getting updated all the time. As I said, it's in a state of flux at the moment, but there's stuff added all the time. So under planning reform, so this is the SA planning portal. So it's the online access to all your planning information, and they're updating these things all the time as to where we're at with the system. But where we are, currently with TAFE, we have to be teaching the current system. That's what we're dealing in. And it's also incredibly important that you have that background knowledge about the current system before we move on into the new one. That and also the training package, nationally recognised training package, which is possibly, I don't know who wrote it, where it originates from, but it's a national. This subject is nationally. It's not just for South Australia. These reforms are happening in South Australia. The training package that we have to assess by is developed nationally. So there are some things that are a bit of a misfit already, but as this gets rolled out, there will be further things which are a misfit, and we've got to juggle those, etc. So do some reading on that in your own time, as I will. But the main point is understand that this is in a state of flux. The other thing is a bit interesting. The other thing that's in a state of flux at the moment is the Lands Titles Office and the Valuer General's Office. So that, I don't know if it's, I think it has now been privatised. It was going through the process of privatisation. So Lands Titles Office is where all of the records in relation to property ownership, property dealings, land boundaries, everything that relates to the ownership and the definition of land, where all those records are kept and maintained, that is being privatised. So obviously there are going to be some changes that flow on from that as you move from a government-run body that supplies information, primarily, in the public's interest, but still at a, not at a profit, but it's still financially feasible. Moving into a privatised situation, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. First, so last semester, we would use Salus for linking into the property location browser. So there's a program called the Property Location Browser, which was a fantastic thing when that first came out. There's no longer a link on sales for the Property Location Browser. When I go do a search for Property Location Browser, I'm not finding a link for it anymore. I assume that's been scrapped. That's fine. There was one really handy thing about the Property Location Browser in that you could get information, and there was a little thing that, little tab in there that said print report. You could create a report from the various different items of information you chose. Unfortunately, we don't have that in the SA Map viewer. So things are changing in terms of how we can access information as well. But this has always been in a state of flux as well. When I first when I was going to uni and we had to go to the Lands Titles office, that was back in the day when things were in paper still. We would have to go up to the second floor to look at titles in paper. Couldn't take a pen in there. You can only take a pencil, because they feared that people would mark original copies of these things, and that's the way it was, and that's not all that long ago, really. Moved into creation of digital copies of title, and then digital storage of these titles, and now a distributed network. What do you call it? It's a distributed ledger, which is basically the technology behind a cryptocurrency, whereby you have various different points of storage of information that get updated automatically, but not if one is corrupted and the others are still there. So that's just so the Lands Titles Office has moved, or the technology has changed in regards to the storage of all that information. But our main consideration as drafters, designers, property professionals is how can we access that information? So, go back to our sources of information. So, one of your first ports of call will be the council website. If you don't know the council website, well then probably your first port of call is going to be SA Map Viewer to determine what our council area is. But as you get to work in various different areas, you'll get to know, oh yeah, we're in this council, we're in this council, we're in this council, we're in this council. Even despite having a bit of an idea about which councils are where, quite often you're going to have to be looking at the council website to gain some information. So you go to the council website and they'll have a link to the development plan, and we'll understand more about development plans as we move through today. They'll have various different information sheets, and that's one thing. So that all councils will have information sheets, but pretty much every single council has them organised in different places. That's the tricky or annoying bit, is to work your way through. Typically a council will have an information sheet on solar panels, but where it's included and what it's called will not be the same through councils. They'll also have approval checklists as well. So it'll tell us what information we need to provide. Typically that approval checklist will include everything that we need to include for our application. However, beware that sometimes at the discretion of duty planners or other members of the council, you'll have to provide other information as well, particular to the property. So sometimes you'll have to, with your development application, state what colours and things your fencing, other materials, etc. Or I did a small drafting job on Melbourne Street, North Adelaide. There the council wanted a quality render of that place in its context with other places, various different views. So sometimes they will ask specifically for these things. Typically other councils won't ask for that detailed information. So you've got those approval checklists, and that's a great guide as to what you need. Could I, or would anybody like to nominate an address? It can't be a fictitious address. It has to be a real address, but an address that we go exploring today. Or I can nominate one as well. Nobody's got one of these. No.
You can do my house if you want.
Let's not make it people's houses. Yeah, let's try to think of one. Let's go. Let's go leafy green suburbs. Right. So this program I've pulled up is SA Map Viewer. It's only been available for a couple of years. I love it. It's it has made life so much easier for the collation of information. So much easier than it used to be previously. You'd have to, if you wanted to know what is a registered watercourse or what is not a registered watercourse, you'd have to pay $50 to order a map from the state government for that portion to determine, am I on a registered watercourse or is this watercourse not registered? Those sorts of things. With SA Map Viewer, you've got your satellite image, you've got your various different forms of maps there, whether it's the road map, whether it's a topographic map. You can go in there and you can overlay all this information that you want over that geographic service. So super handy. We'll explore that more and more. So to clear things up a little bit, what I'll do is I'll chuck it on roads. So when we put it on roads, it shows us also the cadastral boundary of the property. So whenever anybody refers to the word like cadastre or cadastral, that means the legal boundaries of that property. But essentially, this is not what's represented on here is certainly should never be taken as a legal boundary. Sometimes it can be quite accurate. Sometimes it can be significantly out. So recently I was looking at a place, looking at the boundary, established okay, that's SA Map Viewer says this is where the boundary is. Survey came back about 6 meters difference. So that's an extreme example. Typically, it's within a metre or so for your larger allotments, and it can be within less than that for your residential areas. That is not a legal boundary. If you need to determine a legal boundary, you need to have that surveyed, or refer to a survey that's been recently conducted. But that shows us pretty much what property we're dealing with. You could also go to topographic view. So topographic or topography, that relates to the slope of the land. And that one is, what's that? Oh, sorry. Oh. These lines here, these are contours. So typically within the urban area, they're set at 2 meters. I was hoping I'd see what they're set at by scrolling out. No, it's not. No, it's not particularly clear.
It's too flat.
Yeah, it is too flat. But these, yeah. Okay, we've got some other contours. Maybe I needed to scroll in a little bit further. Anyhow, in the absence of any numbers attached, let's assume they're at 2 meter contours. I don't expect them to be. I don't expect there to be 5 meter fall between one side of the road and the other side of the road.
I think they don't put numbers with all the lines either, so it might not be a number at this line, but with another contour line.
Yeah. So
we've got that choice of topographic and roads. If you want to see your cadastral boundaries on the topographic map, you can go up to data sets, go to land management, property and planning, scroll right down to the bottom and put in valuation cadastre or parcel cadastre. The reason we've got those two different things, parcel cadastre and valuation cadastre, is because sometimes, typically valuation cadastre and the parcel cadastre will line up with each other, but sometimes people can have properties merged for their council rate assessment. So they'll say, well, look, we've got our house here, we've got our tennis court there, we treat it as the one property, and we pay one set of rates instead of two, and the Valuer General will merge that valuation cadastre. So you get to see those property boundaries on there, but the main thing that we want to be seeing is what is our local council area, or we can tick land development plan zone categories, and so that applies a shading over all the properties, and we can see that this dark blue is distinct from this area, this beige coloured area. Still doesn't tell us what we want to know, so we can click on that and then click on what's here. So, development plan UN. Anybody know what UN is short for? Local council area. Unley, yep. Spot on. And we've got RHC.
Residential historic conservation.
I reckon you're spot on. Are you going to say the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see an R, it's primarily going to be residential. I don't know of any R zones that relate to anything else. So say with R, and then HC, whenever you see an H, it's pretty much always going to be a historic zoning. But then we've also got policy area here. Oh, well, there we go, residential historic conservation. Well, no surprises there. And no cigars either for that one, sorry. So there we go, we've got that information. So we go, all right, we've got Unley Council area. Well then, let's open up the Unley Council website. So here we are, welcome to the City of Unley. All sorts of information up there, not all of it relevant to us. What we want to be looking at is building and development. So we get in there, and from there we've got a link to the development plan, which we'll explore a little bit more later on. We've got a link here to development plan amendments. So the development plan amendments, kind of a handy thing for developers if there have been changes happening. Let's say you've got residential 1A, which allowed subdivision of allotments with a minimum 13-metre frontage. Then properties with a frontage of 25 metres could not have been carved up into two. But as soon as they make that change to minimum frontage of 10 metres, then places can be subdivided, etc. So that's one of the sources of information for people who are wanting to develop land. They'll go, okay, well, there's been this recent change. We can purchase those properties with those developable frontages at the same sort of price they've been selling for recently before they go up in price, before everybody's onto it, etc. So development plan amendments can be handy if you're looking around for those type of things. What else? Proposed development plan changes. And, well, they've got a link here to state planning reform as well. So that's probably going to be a link right back to probably planning for them.
Are the development plan amendments separate to the development plan? If you go through SA.gov, you find all the development plans for all the...
No, I don't know at what speed they're updated, but I imagine that information is released at the same time. Yeah, I would certainly not expect that you'd get any variants. You'd want to keep those exactly the same. Actually, I've never really mucked around with the Unli website, but so we're all new to this. So we've got Unli development plan, application forms and resources. So one of the things you're asked to do in this subject, and one of the things it says in the unit, is it says you need to be able to fill out application forms. I have to see that you can fill out an application form. Things are changing in this regard. Not all councils still have application forms. A lot of councils will have an online development application, but the information that they're requesting is typically the same. So what I'll be doing whenever you can get those development application forms from the council website, do so. Where you can't, I'll supply them for you. Because I've got, last semester emailed the council and said, hey, can you, because they keep changing all the time, and councils are moving toward online application only. So we've got application forms and resources. Well, let's have a look in that. So we've got forms, resources and guidelines, requirements for applicants, contractors working on council land. Well, probably won't be working on council land. Let's treat it as a private property. Resources and guidelines. And there we go. We've got some fact sheets. So we've found our fact sheets already. Authorisation to alter public road and damage to council infrastructure. That will be important to you if you want to cut a driveway in. You know, you're going to damage council infrastructure in the process. You're going to chop up possibly a footpath, a curb, maybe even take out some trees. That's a little bit more convoluted. Brush fences. Are you allowed to have a brush fence? And in what area? Change in land use. So whenever we pretty much whenever we do any work to a building, we have to seek council approval to do so. If we're making some internal changes to a building which are non-structural, making some changes which are non-structural, then we won't have to gain. Typically, we won't have to gain council approval. Not always, but beyond that, if we're making some changes, we'll have to seek council approval. One of those things is change in land use. So this used to be a Mitsubishi plant where cars were made. It's now an education facility there. There was a lot of application and zone changes, etc., to go through to be able to have this as an education facility. Typically, you won't be dealing. Yes.
Like some they have their own house and they are running their own business in that house. So how do we say this commercial or residential? Because he's a Mara agent and it's a big office inside his house.
Yeah, that is quite a difficult one, and one that there's not. It's always a case-specific answer, and it depends how the local council wants to deal with that and what they actually want in that area. And it's also something that councils will have to deal with more and more as information technology enables people to run businesses from their own home much easier. We have less impetus to actually have an office in a city for some industries. So typically, what is typically done is that people will do that sort of thing until the council say this is what needs to happen. I think technically what you should do is you should contact the council and say these are our intentions, this is what we want to do, what are the limitations. Some councils are completely fine with that, some won't be. Possibly, look, a good indication is actually speaking to your council. Yeah.
If you're looking into a property and the likelihood of it being subdivided.
Mm-hmm.
Is this where you would find information about it, or do you just have to contact the council?
Yes, there certainly will be. There should be information here about carrying out subdivisions. So I think before you ever phone the council, it's best to go through their website, have a look at all their resources, do some exploration first, because you're gonna be less of a burden on their time because of that, but also you're going to be able to hone down to exactly what answers you need, because you'll answer a whole lot of your questions there, and probably in the process you'll come up with new questions. So it's much better to do all your research here, then go, okay, well I still have these questions, then go and ask those, rather than run the risk of having a chat with council and then going, oh yeah, I should have asked them that as well. So have a look here. Let's have a look, see if we're doing a subdivision, what will we want to, well, we'll probably want to have a look at authorisation to alter public road and damage to council infrastructure. We'll probably want to have a look at, we may want to have a look at change in land use if we're, if we've got an office property or a sheep farm, something like that, we want to turn into houses. Obviously, got to change of land use. We're going to have to.
I think the guidelines for development.
Guidelines for development, yeah, where's that one? EFG, oh yeah, so guidelines for development, definitely, we'll want to have a look at that. We want, no, probably not a lot in non-compliant development, maybe have a read of that. You may need to look at regulated and significant trees. If you've got regulated and significant trees on your property, you might want to have a look at developments exempt from requiring development approval. You probably want to have a look at demolition and demolition form. And that's probably it for a subdivision. But the other thing, so you get your information there about those things. But the other thing you want to make, well, the first port of call is you want to have a look at what is the zoning of my property, and we'll have a look at this development plan stuff later on. You want to have a look, what is the zone of my property? What is the minimum allotment size? So you start with, okay, what's the minimum allotment size? It says minimum allotment size is 300 square metres. So you go, okay, I've got 1,200 square metres, I can get 4 of them. But then, beyond that, you'll then look at what is minimum frontage. And if it says minimum frontage is this, you go, well, I can't get 4 allotments out of that because of the frontage I have. You'll have a look to see if hammerhead allotments are possible. So does everybody know what a hammerhead allotment is? Yep. No?
Is that where you have the property behind and then a skinny driveway?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah. So looking at the plan view, yeah, you look down, it looks like a bit of an axe or a hammer. So block at the back, skinny driveway access. So you want to have a look at those things. That will then give you that guide as to whether the zoning allows a subdivision of the nature that you have intended, or if it doesn't, then you look at the nature of another form of subdivision, do your sums, work out, okay, is that actually going to be financially feasible? And that's a very, not that I've never done subdivisions, but I've dealt a lot with people who have done subdivisions through working as a valuer. So, yeah, a big trap is underestimating the costs of that subdivision, overestimating what your returns are going to be, and underestimating the costs. They can, sometimes they can get far too close, or in other situations, you might go, okay, we've got this building here, we want to do a subdivision here, so you chop off the back, make a hammerhead allotment, and think, okay, well, we're going to earn $300,000 from that, but you've got $50,000 in surveying and titling costs, etc., and supply of infrastructure, and then your agents' fees and things like that. You get it down to, you earn $230,000 off that sale, and then realise you've wiped $300,000 off the value of that original property because you significantly reduce the amenity of the original dwelling. So yeah, so all those things, beyond just the legalities of what you can do, are very important things to consider. So we're in the Unley Council website, all sorts of stuff there that we might want to have a look at. Got in our forms, got development application form, declaration of applicants. I guess that's let's have a look at that one actually. So I don't know if that's Powerline declaration or not. Regulation Schedule 5(2)(a). No, it's just a declaration that you will do what you intend to do. Certainly not all councils have this as a separate form. Although it appears to cover things such as Powerline declaration as well. So a lot of councils will have application form and Powerline declaration form. That's fairly much the standard. They've got a declaration form that's picking up a bunch of other things. But the main one is that Powerline declaration. You have to say that I'm going to be building a house which has minimum safe clearances to the power lines. And if ever in doubt about that, you can you have a look at the Electricity Act, or you can contact the Office of the Technical Regulator as well. SA Power Networks might also provide you with that information. You can contact them and okay, here's the information, but typically the Office of the Technical Regulator is the better party to be contacting. That's their job, is to field inquiries about building adjacent power lines and everything else to do with power infrastructure. So they've got the development application, and to do your power line declaration, you've got to declare a bunch of other things as well. So fine. Application for extension of time. So yeah, if you're intending to, typically given 12 months in which to start your building and a certain amount of time in which to complete it. If that's not going to happen, they've got an avenue here for applying for extension of time to that. That's a pretty handy thing. Development application fees. So tell us, how much does it cost to lodge an application? So we've got a, up there we've got lodgement fee, minimum lodgement fee, all applications. So baseline is going to cost us $67 plus all applications that require building rules consent and development cost exceeds $5,000. Then got $75.50. If it's going to be a non-complying application, $107. Building rules consent only, etc., etc., etc. You can work your way through that, and then additional fees. Typically, you've got some percentage fees, so based on the size of your building, or at times on the value of your building and the value of the proposed work. So you've got to work your way through, and then sum it all up at the bottom. Council will also, you do that, get an idea for your client, but council will do the same thing, and they'll work through it. Okay, this is what it is. This is what we're charging. So plenty of forms there and information for doing everything that you want. We've got development approvals. Let's have a look there. So that's just a bit of an explainer as to what development approvals are. So that's what we went through in Monday's class, talking about that. What's development approval? What's plan? What's building rules consent, etc. And some handy information on getting your application together. So yeah, pretty much a lot of the stuff that we're covering in this class actually. So if you need a refresher on those things, by all means, there is a great deal of information typically on your council websites. So we've got the development plan, we've got our information sheets, we've seen those. Actually, we haven't seen an approval checklist yet. Let's have a look for an approval checklist. As I said before, I don't know my way around the Unley Council website. We're finding this together. If anybody's got some bright ideas as to where we could find that checklist, let me know. But maybe under preparing your application. Okay. I've got a checklist here. So certificate of title, 2 copies, power line clearance declaration, 2 copies, construction industry training levy receipt. So whenever you do any development work, you've got to pay a fee to the Construction Industry Training Board, CITB. That helps to pay facilities like this, and a bunch of other things in regards to the construction industry. So it's a way of picking up funds for that. Then plans and drawings. So they're saying 2 copies. Typically, councils have requested 3 copies, but that's another thing that's changed. Is by and large you can just submit your plans and all of the information as PDF, and they'll take those PDFs and then they'll print off a copy, stamp it, and you'll get a printed copy. Probably a very expensive way of printing your plans, etc. Paying for your application fees, etc. But so that the thing of 2 copies, that refers back to if and when you're sending in paper-based stuff. But you can contact the council and say, hey, do you mind if I just send in PDFs? In my recent experience, that's been fine. So plans, drawings, 2 copies. What you'll need there is a site plan. And councils want things to be to a certain scale. Please heed that. That's something that I do pull people up on a bit as we go through. People go, oh, well, this plan fits really nicely as a 1:250 scale on this page, or 1:300 works really well for me. Unfortunately, that's not in. Yeah. So I guess in part it's slightly a throwback to when people were scaling off drawings, but that still does happen for some very limited things. Sometimes a plumber will go, all right, I want to be working out this getting an idea about this plumbing run here before we hit this tree's root zone, before I need to go hooking around this way for doing this. You will not have, you would not have anticipated that when you were doing the drawings, and so you wouldn't have dimensioned these things in. Their only option is to scale off those drawings. They'll do that with a scale ruler. That scale ruler will have scales like 1:10, 1:20, or 1:5 as well. They'll have 1:50, 1:100, 1:200, 1:500. So that's why you have to stick to those standard scales. And do that when I see plans coming through that are not standard scales. I'll tell you have to redo that to a standard scale, which mean you end up moving notes around and doing all this stuff to make it fit and things like that. It's much better. You'll need to have dimensioned floor plans showing both existing and proposed development.
applicable. Whilst we're talking about plans and things like that, a floor plan with its dimensions, you have to be able to build that place relying upon those dimensions. So you have to have enough dimensions.
Clear.
Yeah, it has to be clear. It has to be sufficient. So I don't want to have any walls in there that I go, okay, well, I can't tell how big that wall is or exactly where it needs to be. Those things need to be dimensioned. Now, on our floor plans, we don't need to dimension cupboards and things like that. That can be for in other plans. So you can be judicious about, okay, we're getting a lot of information on this plan, let's produce another plan where we can have that information. But with a floor plan, a carpenter needs to be able to stand up the walls and have the doorways and windows in exactly where they need to be as an absolute base minimum. So that means all your dimensions have to be in there, but we do have to keep it simple and clear, like I said, and one of those ways is thinking about how can we produce this information without replicating, without telling somebody twice. So that will be, we've got a dimension from here to there, and then on the other side of the building we've got a dimension from there to there, and we've got a building length. That way somebody can work that out. We don't need to produce, So think about those things, and it's something you're going to have to do with every single job that you think about. How can I do my dimensions here that will make the best sense? And we'll talk more about dimensions later on, but that's important. You've got to produce elevations of the building, and I'm just talking about these things as if people understand exactly what I mean. Is that cool? Yeah, cool. So you've got to produce elevations, and then also various other plans dependent on the type of development you are proposing. So they've got their checklist.
Yeah, like details of gutter and all of this.
Yeah. Anything that you think is relevant to that. So when you deviate away from your checklist, it's because you think we've got some specific things about this property that the council will want to know. Or council will tell you. They'll say, we want this thing. And then, of course, appropriate fees and so on. So there we go. We've got found our checklist. Now, we'll go through our development plan a little bit later on. So I had a good look at the council website and found plenty of really good information. There, we'll also want to get information from the Lands Titles Office. So SAILIS, so South Australian something or other Land Information Service, is the place to get that information. But things are changing on that site currently. So, had a look at this morning, wasn't the same as when I looked at it last time. Beware of that, but still, it's where you get all of your information that relates to titles, ownership, boundaries, etc. That's your portal for that. And over the break, I had a bit of a muck around with Surveyor, which was lots of fun, pretty insightful. Sort of took me through the process a bit. Showed where he told me where in Salus you can get all the old surveyors' logs and things like that, and you can get them for free, which is really, like for, if you're a bit of a nerd, bit of fun. So some really interesting information there. You can get all that stuff. You can get. Let's have a look at what you can get now. On my slides here from last semester, I've got zoning categories on Salus. Well, actually, I'm not sure if you can still. I think yes, you can get the development plans through Salus, but it's just much quicker to get them through SA Map Viewer, as we saw earlier on. Just go through that way. I think that's the better way. And yeah, any of the Lands Titles Office information. So I've got it. Salus. So probably the first thing you see on the page is account customer login. Probably good reason for that. You don't have to go to that. You can go down here to view full site of available products. Please proceed as a guest user. So tuck down the bottom there, but you can still get in for free. It's guest user. We won't have a look at this sales video tutorial. If you've got some spare time, yeah, by all means check it out. But we'll keep it fairly brief. All sorts of interesting things in here. Objecting to a property valuation. So if you say, okay, the value general has my place value too high, so you can go through there. Lands, titles, office fee calculator. So if you want to see what fees are going to be charged for various different services through the lands, titles, office. What are we going to want? We want to do a land search. So let's do a property search now. Try to remember what our address is that we typed in there.
20.
Number 20 Victoria Avenue, Unley Park. So let's go. Yep. So we've got an address. We'll go street number 20. And there we go. So that's given us our current certificate of title. You can also get, so much of this information you can also, or some of this information you can also get through SA Map Viewer, which if you're on there, just include those data sets and get this information. But what you won't be able to do through there is do a register search, which is to order a copy of the current certificate of title. Has everybody seen a certificate of title? Yes. Yep. Maybe. It's not super important, but basically it's a document that sets out who owns what interests there are, what's some of the history of that, legal history, etc., and then it has a survey plan image attached to show diagrammatically this is the piece of land that we're dealing with. So to get that one, yeah, wow, it's $30 now. Title details provides current information about the title, including registered proprietors, parcel details, last sale details, constraints, and valuation numbers. So $10.70 for that. So that's just like some of the information that's on your certificate of title. Just a snippet of those things. Title and valuation package provides current information about the title, including registered proprietor, parcel details, last sale details, constraints, valuation details, building details. Those building details, there's not a great deal of information on that. It will probably say 5HDIG or something like that, which means a house with 5 main rooms and a double iron garage. So there's not a great deal of information that comes through there. And valuation numbers, that's a 9-digit unique number that every separate rateable parcel has. Other valuation details, so where are we? Provides capital and site value. The difference between capital and site value. Site value is the value of that portion of land as if there were no improvements on it. So improvements considered any works that are carried out, including fences, etc. Buildings, of course. But then capital value is the estimated value of that whole parcel. Now, those capital values, they should not be confused with market value. So typically those capital values are going to sit slightly below market value. The reason for that is because because you pay your rates and taxes based on your capital value, when those capital values exceed what people understand is the market value of their property, they lodge an objection to their valuation. It takes up a lot of time. So typically those values are set a little bit less, but they're fairly unreliable. You can't say, okay, well, they're always 7% below market value. The statistical models to create those capital values isn't that good. The data set isn't good enough to give you that sort of level of accuracy. But that's that information. That might be of use for you. Building details provides information for dwelling on the property, such as year built, building style, and roof construction. That year built, not always dead accurate. So going through that, you'll see lots of buildings which were built in 1905, lots of buildings which were built in 1910, lots of buildings which were built in 1920. Now, there's probably a whole heap of buildings that were built between those times, but they're approximate dates. Should always be seen as such. Building style and roof construction, generally fairly good, but yeah, sometimes they can be a little bit off as well. Plan image. That's one thing that you probably will get quite often. So often you don't need you don't need the whole certificate of title. Whenever you're doing a planning application, yes, you need that certificate of title. But sometimes you'll want to establish boundaries, establish an idea about things for neighbouring properties. So not just for your own. You want to get that plan image for a neighbouring property. Much cheaper than purchasing the title, or half that cost. And actually, let's view example. See what example they've got there. Oh yeah. Try to make that a little bit larger. Plus, and yeah. So that's pretty typical survey plan image. So, and this is a survey plan image of an existing property, I'd say this is an older property. The reason I can see that is because we've got our accurate locations of our boundaries, and then we've got these little squiggly lines next to them. That means there's a corrugated iron fence running through there. So that corrugated iron fence is not quite on the boundary. Right? So that sort of tells you that, okay, people were building these fences a while back before there was an accurate determination of that boundary. And this happens quite a bit. That there are the boundaries aren't where people initially thought they were, or that features are not on the boundary. And that is also something that it's not in this course. We don't have included that in any of the procedure documents that you've got to work with a surveyor, but you will quite often have to do that whenever you're building something. Bang on the boundary, get a boundary survey done, because what you do not want to be doing is building on, doing a wall of your house over onto somebody else's property. Rectification of this is very expensive. Yes.
So for this, before designing, we have to done a survey plan as well.
You don't have to do a survey plan. So, I'm looking at a couple of properties at the moment. Well, doing building on them. One of them, I haven't had a survey done. Doesn't concern me. I'm not dealing with boundaries. I'm not dealing with any significant sort of distances from boundaries that would impose any considerations under the NZZ. Another property, yes, exactly where it sits is vital. So yeah, that one, fork it out for a survey, other one not. It's always at your discretion as to, is this important? Is it value for money for doing that? But yeah, look,
Oh, another thing we've got here on this survey plan image, we've got A and B. Does anybody know what A and B might be?
Subdivided block.
No, no. So they're leading into this little dashed line area.
Split the roof.
Not that either, but yeah. Keep going, keep going. So we've got two allotments. We've got allotment 103 and allotment 104. There's a little dashed area in there.
Can you not build there?
We can build.
Mm.
Could it be easement?
Yeah, we're getting very close. So whenever you have these dashed lines like that, that indicates an interest by another party. And so the way that we talk about whether somebody has a financial stake or has some control over what happens on a piece of land, we term that as being interest. So when you purchase a land, a parcel of land, you have obviously a financial interest in that property, and that interest is recorded on the certificate of title. I'd have to have a look at the title, see what the nature of this title is. It may be what's called a moiety title, where this party has part interest over this property, this party has part interest over that property. They're very rare, but they exist. It may also be that there is, as you suggested, an easement for there to say that we've got, two buildings here, and our driveway access is down the back there, so that you can't build on it, like you said. So it might be an easement. You'd have to have a look at the title, but that dashed line indicates an interest that another party has. So if I had no further information, I had to put money on it, I'd say it's probably got to do with a party wall. So a wall that exists between those two properties, neither owner of either allotment is allowed to knock that wall down. So that wall is the width of this bit, and knocking down your half will make the other half unstable, hence you've both got this shared interest in that wall. Yeah, so look, there's nowhere telling me where it is, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's an old set of masonettes down at Lyersbury or something like that. From looking at that. So that's your very typical survey plan image. Now, there are all sorts of survey plan images. Some of them are really detailed. So you get a certificate of title, and there's been some detailed surveying work carried out, and it's been lodged with the Land Titles Office. You have a really detailed survey plan image. Other times, you have an incredibly simple survey plan image. So that information can be ascertained from via sailors. Yes, you have to pay for it. What this subject asks for are things like ownership details. I don't and I cannot expect you to go in here and pay, $10.70 for getting those ownership details. All you have to do is go, yep, this is where I get it from. So you have to show me I'm able to get those ownership details, because the next step is just, clicking on it, putting in your credit card details and receiving it. So I'm fine with you taking a snip. Now, does everybody know how to take a snip of a page? Yep. Yes or no? Yep. Okay. You'll be doing that a lot with this. Just bringing up information on the screen and taking a snip of that relevant information. And then, my favourite, SA Map Viewer. Once again, has all that cadastral information, has zoning categories, so it says what the zone is, and also under those zoning categories it says what the policy areas are. So it makes, because it used to be that you'd have to get the development plan and you'd have to look at your map index, find out what map your property is on, look at that one,
to determine what your zone and policy is a convoluted process. Stacks of geographic information, soil types, registered watercourses, all sorts of things, and then lots of built environment stuff, such as where an SA Water main line runs, where all of this infrastructure runs, and this is incredibly important stuff for you as designers, drafters, because it will impact upon some of the infrastructure you need to provide on that property, and will significantly impact at times on the cost of development as well, or on the potential for development. One instance is if you have to build, or you've been requested to design a place or work on a place which is adjacent to a creek, right? Or there's a bit of a depression in the ground that gathers water throughout the year. What you are not allowed to do is build within 30 metres if it's a registered watercourse. So you have to determine, is it registered watercourse, is it not registered watercourse? If it's not registered, well then you can put your house there. If it is, then you've got 30 metres offset. Also, you have to do your septic soakage at least 50 metres away from that registered watercourse if it's registered. If you have a mains sewer connection, well then you don't need to do a septic system, and you can build 30 metres, and you can have a smaller allotment doesn't impinge. If you don't have main sewer, then you'll need to do an on-site wastewater system, soakage area 150 to 200 square metres, 50 metres away from the creek. That can be a real deal breaker. So you have to look. But you're able to get basically all of that information in the one-stop shop. So we'll have a bit of a look at that. I'll have a bit more of a look at that one now. Yeah. So yeah, as I mentioned before, actually I didn't mention this, but SA Map Viewer, that works off the platform, the old platform that was the property location browser. So property location browser was an awesome thing when that came out, but then this map viewer has basically taken that property location browser and added a whole bunch of options on top for you. One thing that is a little bit cumbersome, we can't print those reports like we could with property location browser. So in here, you have to bring up everyone individually, take a screenshot of that. But what you can do is you can tick a whole bunch of things at the one time. So you go building height limits, bushfire protection areas, what else have we got? Character preservation districts, that might be important for this one. Design wind speed. We might want to go energy efficiency, let's go energy efficiency climate zones. Let's go develop plan map index. What else have we got? Planning, future fund, urban roads, residential. Well, yeah, let's see if it's a Resi code. Now, we'll talk about Resi code next week. It's not something that's included in the training package, but something that's important for you to understand in context. SA heritage places, yeah, let's look. We want to find out whether our place that we've got to knock down is state heritage listed. That will change our plans significantly. Well, if we want, we could find some survey marks. That one's not letting me. It's not letting me do that here. Oh, maybe I've got enough things. Yeah, so I've got enough things happening now. So maximum. Oh yeah, here we go. Maximum 10 layers can be added. Rightio. Then. Let's close that. So I've ticked a whole bunch of things. What we've got, this is interesting. We've got some pink, what are they? Pentagons and some blue pentagons. Let's find out what they are. So what's here? We've got, well, I dare say that's going to have something to do with state heritage. So what's the nature of that? Details dwelling, Urilla Hall, Heritage Class 1, S, so State Heritage listed property. So we're going to have to do some more digging about what can be done on that property because it's State Heritage
listed. Yeah. We've got, yeah. So that's our certificate of title reference. Every single property, every saleable portion, everything you can sell has a separate certificate of title. If it doesn't have a separate certificate of title, you can't sell it separately. But that's our certificate of title reference, and this is our allotment and plan image reference. So we've got an F there for filed plan. Commonly you'll see DP for deposited plan. The difference between a filed plan and a deposit plan, I don't know. They both look the same. Strata plans, community plans, etc. look different because they are different. I don't really know, I don't understand the distinction between FP or F and DP. For all intents and purposes, the same as far as I'm concerned. And then we've got allotment 285 within that filed plan. So if you were to order that filed plan, you'll get a plan of the area with all the different allotments on it and the survey information on that. Or if you order your survey plan image for allotment 285, within that plan you get just yours. So we've ticked all those things, so we can scoot through here and take a screenshot of whatever is important to us. So design wind speed. I've got N1, and does that design wind speed, does that make sense to everybody? Yep. Cool. All done timber framing code, or some have, some, yeah. So energy efficiency, climate zone, does that make sense to everybody? No harm in saying it doesn't. No?
Does that affect the star rating that the house needs to?
Well, yes, indirectly that does affect the star rating that the house needs. Well, no, every house needs to achieve 6 stars, but how it gets to that 6 stars will be dictated. Well, not dictated, but influenced by this. So, for our metropolitan area, for the vast majority of the metropolitan area, in fact, I think for all of it, it's climate zone 5. And I just can't remember. Yeah, I think that's right. As the numbers get higher, so 5, 6, 7, etc., we're moving into typically cooler climates. But that's just a rule of thumb. It's just the climates are different. So if we were to, if we go up to Cooper Pedy or something, during the day it's really hot, during the night it's really, really cold. Different climate, not necessarily cooler, but just far more fluctuation. And so they're just treated differently for all these assessment purposes. So we've got, we're in the metro area, we're climate zone number 5. That means that we'll have certain insulation requirements under the National Construction Code. If we were to go further south down to parts of City of Onkaparinga or Victor Harbour, something like that, we'll be in climate zone 6, which means we have different insulation requirements, different requirements around windows to meet our energy rating. So this will be an indication for us, a guide for us. But as you keep working on things, you end up knowing, okay, well, I'm building in the metro area, it's going to be climate zone 5. We've got, development plan map index. So if we were to go to the, so we'll bring up our development plan a little bit later on. We'll have a look at that, we'll have a look at that map index, UN 8, to find out what other information there is relating to that property. Parcel cadastre, so we've got, as we mentioned before, we've got file plan 12876, allotment 285, certificate of title 5.91440, etc. And you get all sorts of odd things happening with titles. Sometimes you've got multiple titles and things happening. And sometimes you don't have, allotment. So AL is for an allotment, but sometimes you just have S. That means for a section. So you have sections, plans, allotments. As you get smaller and smaller and smaller. So we've got all that information on SA Map Viewer. And that was just under the drop-down menu of land management. So I'll untick a few of these. and we'll have a very quick look at some of the other things you don't need to know for the subject, but other stuff which is kind of handy for what you might want to look at later on. Oh, actually, yeah, this is interesting. So, res code. So I've still got the res code highlighted here. This property is not within a res code boundary. But we'll talk about those. I'll leave parcel cadastre on. Might want to go to infrastructure and utilities. Actually, some of this is important for this subject. We want to look at water main. Put that on. There we go. We've got mains water to the property. Wastewater gravity main. Yep, we've got gravity sewer running through the area as well, so we can hook up to sewage. We don't need to do on-site wastewater, as you'd expect in Unley Park. Anything else? Oh, there we go. SAP and so South Australia SA Power Networks, sub-transmission high voltage overhead lines. We do actually, well, we don't have one close to our property, but we've got some around the place. Thankfully, they're all running down streets, so it's probably not going to be an issue for anybody, but it can be something to check. On your certificate of titles, quite often you've got, as I mentioned before, easements located there. A very common easement is for infrastructure like power lines, but sometimes these large high voltage power lines do not have easements associated with them. You look at the title, there's no easement there, but you go, oh, there's a power line heading across here. They will have what's called a statutory easement. So it's not an easement lodged on the title, but it means they still control what you can do with that land underneath. You have to phone the office of the technical regulator and say, I've got this address, what's above me to begin with, what can I do beneath it? So all sorts of stuff available on here. Have a good muck around with it at your own leisure. Get to know it well, here's hoping other things end up getting added to this as years progress. So yeah, so keep mucking around with it. But plenty of good information on there. So they are our principal sources of information. Now they're not going to be our only sources of information. As I've just keep dropping things like the Office of the Technical Regulator, SA Power Networks, you're going to have to get information from these bodies as well from time to time. You might have to get information from SafeWork SA about carrying out demolitions. So there's certain scale and scope of demolitions that you'll need to notify them of. Can't think of any other sources of information. Can anybody think of any other sources of information that we might need to be calling upon? Now,
Building height and elevations, how we decide building height.
yeah. So yeah. Actually, that's going to be in the development. Well, it will be in the development plan, but you can also get that from SA Map Viewer as well. So, well, no. Not always from the SA Map Viewer. So SA Map Viewer has building height limitations for some places, but typically what you're going to do is you're going to read your development plan. In the council-wide objectives, it will have, building heights must be no greater than 6.5 metres above natural ground level. That's a very common thing. But then you read that in the council-wide objectives, and you read your zone-specific. And it says, within this zone, we only allow 5.6 metres above natural ground level. Also. So you get that from there. Well, of course, other sources of information, obviously, various different consultants you've got to get. So if you're removing trees, you probably have to have an arborist to say, this is what can be removed, this is what cannot be removed. You've got to have a geotechnical report or geotechnical engineer take some soil samples and work out what the bore logs are You'll need to have all sorts of various different consultants as well. How are people feeling? We're about to change into something else. Do people want to take a bit of a break? Yeah. Well, let's take 5. I'll save this recording, break them up a little bit for those at home as well.